So we moved into this LabMT lexicon, right? This thing we paid people in Mechanical Turk to help us construct. And we've got 10,000 words now that fit language pretty well, and they fit these four corpora: New York Times, Google Books, Twitter, and music lyrics. So, it's not gonna be great for some other things. And I'll show you how that fit works in some detail in a little bit. I like talking about these things in detail. One piece thinking about these words, because we're doing this other thing where we're going from the atoms right out to the large-scale text. And as I've talked about, we're not even going to try to evaluate sentences. You will see people do that over and over. Shouldn't do that. So what we're doing may not work, but I think what I've showed you, and I'll continue to show you, it does actually work as a functioning kind of instrument. Could be improved. And we will improve it. We have improved it. All right, so this is looking at, so we're going to get ambient happiness, and we'll come back to this, but we're going to look at take all the sentences that have a particular word, and then look at so we have a happiness score for that word, and then get a score for everything that's around it. So this is an ambient happiness thing. Right, so every time, we have the word love, we have a score for it. Let's find every sentence or every tweet or whatever that has love in it and score all the words around it and see if they correlate. Is it just completely random? Is there nothing connected to it? And so it turns out they are correlated, right? So this is ambient happiness with an element. They're pretty good, and we'll come back to this for a few more examples. But this is not bad, right? So on average, so it doesn't say anything about a sentence, but it does give you this nice thing that there is some correlation with a positive word and the rest of the sentence, on average, and a negative word and the rest of the sentence. There are problems with stemming, right? So this is done often in computer science. You just take all the past tenses and all the gerunds and so on, and just chop all those things off, and just say, so if you have jump, the word jump, jumping, jumped, jumps, you just turn them all into jump. Right, and then you would score that. But some past tenses are a little more negative, right? So seen in isolation, people will react a little bit more to them. So as I said, we scored those things independently, and you can see there's a little bit of a variation between present and past tense, for example. So people just score. So we also have some funny things in there, like just words. Oh, I should add that. We have cities. We have city names. So we had, Seattle is just in this thing. So I have a little Perl script that just says isHappy.pl, and it just returns whether it is in the list or not and the score, right? So Seattle is, not bad. Atlanta should be in there, right? So people have a lower score for that. So there was an article in Wired where they took our data set and made a kind of an opinion of sorts, like sort of a funny opinion piece about cities around the US based on how people scored the names of these things. So we don't have New York City or whatever, but it's sort of a funny, let's see about Boston. Let's look at Boston. I'll find that one. It's Sam Arbusman, who's written some interesting things over the years. 5 points, so it's better than Atlanta. All right, that's it. That's just an interesting feature, and we'll come back to this in various ways. So it does also suggest then that you could take a word or a term and then just look at the happiness around it and use that to evaluate it, right? So this is something where we have a score for a word, and then we get a score for everything around it using our word scores. But we could just take a term, something we've never seen before, and look at how that's popular, and we look at how all the words around it appear, and that will give us some opinion poll. So we'll get to that in just a little bit. This is a first attempt to create this. Well, we had the one for blogs, but this is the first one with Twitter. And so this is somehow a MATLAB script that produces this insanity. There are all these little images in here. So that's Michael Jackson's glove, for example. That's swine flu or H1N1. That's the bailout. This is Twitter got hacked. That's the death of Patrick Swayze. No ghost. That's a Earthquake off of Chile, that's the end of Lost, because people talked about Lost a lot, and Lost is a negative word, so that was the finale of Lost. So, that's not that's something where it's not really functioning super well, I suppose. Can I zoom in on this? Yeah. Which one is that? That's a sucker one. I shouldn't have done that. I have a few sucker ones in here, and we haven't published this, but we did some stuff for the Olympics and for World Cup soccer. You could see swearing go up in Portuguese and happiness go up in Spanish, and it was really Mexico versus Brazil. And Mexico scored in the first 2 minutes or something, and the Brazilian swearing just goes through the roof, and you just see this, dip in happiness. I'll have another image of that in a little bit. It is, I think, the only example where we get large-scale spontaneous happiness. So when you look across this, all the big positive outliers, they're all these normal kinds of events, right? So Twitter is dominated, less so, but it's certainly in the past. This goes up to, 2011. As I said, it's an early effort. So 4th of July is here, right? You can see they're up. They've popped up. That's Halloween. No, that's Thanksgiving. That's Halloween, food-based. Champagne, right, for New Year's Day, and Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. So you could it'd be interesting to see how you react. I'm not going to ask you personally, but people have reactions to this sort of thing. They're like, "Oh, Christmas is terrible," or Thanksgiving is awful. And that's always a reveal about their personal experience. But there's a trope, right? That's a good sort of trope that terrible things happen with family on these events. But actually, it turns out that people and bots and all these other things, bots are not such a big deal here, are tweeting away about, they are generally, it's not just Christmas is today, they're saying positive things, family, da-da-da. But of course, there are negative things, right? So you see like lonely, bored, angry, you'll see some of those things, but they're just not dominating. Just like we saw for Tuesday and Saturday, right? There are negative words going against the grain, like bored and hangover, stuff like that. So you can see that nuance thing, and we'll have some of that. Let's see. This one goes up to, this is a hacking scandal with Murdoch. That's Amy Winehouse's death. This is the earthquake in Japan, which led to the disaster. This is some rioting and so on. So what's not shown here is when we first did this, we still had ANU, right? The 1,000 words that we had to start with, and that didn't fit language very well, right? It had pancakes and ski jump and stuff in it. And if you use that list, we didn't see any of these negative events, right? We got the positive ones popping up, but we didn't get any of these negative events. It just sort of bubbled along. So increasing this word lens, getting to 10,000 words that then actually fit the language better, we started to actually see all this structure. So the big upshot, and we'll see this a little more as I go more in a really deep kind of way, the really surprising thing, and a great thing, was that we expanded our word list, we knew it fit the language better, and instead of wiping out everything we had before, it increased the resolution essentially, right? So it was like getting a better lens for a microscope or a telescope. You still saw the same things as you did before, but now you can see more structure. Now, a priori, that wasn't obvious, right? We could have just had a weird list, and things could have, we'd seen some robustness, but now we're going out, we'd seen some robustness when we took words away for music lyrics, but now we're adding many, many more words that fit better, and so it was very encouraging. And if you look at this, you'll see other pieces. So there's a strong weekly cycle, which we've talked about before, but they're indicated here, right? So Saturdays are reds, Monday and Tuesday are those sort of lighter blues. I guess Sunday's a similar color. But you can see as you go across that that's really clear. And I know I've showed the online version, and we'll play around with that a little bit more as we come to it. So this is a measure of information, and this is the total word count. So let's just look at the word count to start with. We're receiving roughly 10% of all tweets. That was the agreement, putting them in a box on Post-it notes. And you see this is going pretty well for a while, and there are some glitches where we just run out of words, partly because we failed or Twitter failed, right? So that's Twitter blew up. Twitter got attacked here. That's what that was. This is just us not doing a good job. So that happens a few times. But you see it really, the service itself starts to take off. Then this is really Twitter, right? They're changing things in terms of how much data they give out. But it's growing. In 2011, it's become pretty big, and then it really takes off. This is then a measure of, it's an entropy measure, right? So this is the sum of p squared. So any of these work, right? So we have sum of, right, the classic entropy, and I'll write it like this, log 2, 1 over pi. Right, the sum over all words, this is a classic one. So this is the estimated number of bits it takes to encode a particular word that appears with this probability. And then there are these generalized entropies, and maybe I'll call it H2 is this one, or let's say H alpha. So this is the sum of I, and we could, there are a number of them. This is very roughly one, right? So this kind of thing. There are more elaborate ones, for sure. This one, and so this is used in ecology a lot. It's also connected to the Gini coefficient, and you can be interpreted in a nice way, which is you've got a book, and you grab one random word out of it, and then grab another random word out of it. What's the probability that they're the same word? That's its direct interpretation. Or you reach into a forest and grab a critter, and then grab another critter with your random critter grabbing device, and what's the probability that they're the same? You probably get 2 ants. So it has to be a really good, one of those soft hand robots, with a universal food thing, Okay, so that's what we're using, and if you think, and the reason for that is this decays very slowly, right? This log, this is pi to the power of 1. This is pi to the power of 0, basically, right? Polynomial. And we know Zipf's law is that this decays if this is ordered, so we've ordered them by rank. This is decaying, and this is often, this is close to 1 for small, this is a big detail for small I, right? So normally it's like this. This is going to be this is rank now, and we'd have pi log, and you get a break in scaling. And this is this great thing that Jake Williams figured out, and I'll bring that up in later lectures. But this is a slope of 1, -1, and then this is greater than, this is steeper here. However, so if we're worried about this, if it's a slope of -1, then this doesn't, we're summing something that's I to the -1, and then something that's not really moving with it. That doesn't converge. That's a bad situation. In practice, it really does, because there is this cutoff. But you have to be, there's definitely a real worry, and people, only in the last few years, have really seemed to have kind of addressed this a little more. There's a real worry, if you have a subsample, which we do, right? We have 10% of all tweets, which is a subsample of all utterances of all humans. But we could say, if we had all of it, then there'd be something, right? But we have to be very careful about whether, if you have 1% of all tweets, and then you just take what you've got and you estimate entropy from it, if you've only gotten sort of out to here, and you're missing all of this, then your measure of entropy is going to be really, somewhat problematic. So we were worried about that, and we went for this one, which is, this is a square, so this is going to die off much more quickly, even if it's a -1, this sum. And what in practice this means is the top 100 or so words really kind of contribute to this.
You can still have a good sense of if you have those lower end words, right? So if you just look at a whole subsample, or not a subsample, but the whole corpus that you have.
I mean, if you have the whole corpus, you have the whole corpus, right? But if you have 10% of it, then you...
the corpus of what you have.
Yeah. You can estimate it for that thing, but you're really trying to estimate it for all of Twitter. So if you have 10% of Moby Dick, and you measure the entropy for it, so there is this thing, right? So it's a, actually this would be a good exercise. Percentage of a book. So you randomly sample from Moby Dick. You don't read Moby Dick, but you do analyses on it. And so you randomly sample, you have this 0 to 100% sample. and you compute the entropy. And how does it should stabilize, right? But how long does that take? Yeah, and so you play around with that, and you can see, you know, it's concerning, right? It takes this takes a long time to converge. I mean, if this really went out to -1, this is a hard thing to estimate, because you get a bigger sample, this is going to increase. But this one here dies really quickly, and it's really the top 100 words. So there are a lot of function words matter. So it's not unuseful. This is then, we turn this around. This was a Pox question. You can estimate from this entropy a lexical size. So that's if all of these words were equally probable, which is a weird book, but imagine that was true. This is used a lot in ecology. If they were equally probable, what would be the equivalent size of that lexicon? And that's a useful thing to kind of pull out, because it can be something that we can compare easily, right? So we have between 300 and 400 words in our sort of equiprobable lexicon. Kind of goes down, and then it seems to, increase. And it's not being affected in a clear way by this, right? So we can see that it's not being messed with by the size of the data we're getting in. So really what's happening here is the introduction of other languages, right? So Spanish grows in here, and then many other languages, Indonesian in particular, takes off. And so you can see that that's part of it. But you have to be careful with this, and I guess I won't touch on it too much more, but we should. Question, yeah. So that seems fair. So overall, we've got this weekly cycle. We have these outlier days, which are things that we've kind of organized to have, right? We're going to have Christmas and so on. And then there are these shocks to the system, which makes sense, but they're a real mixture, right? So this is the Anna Karenina thing. There are many ways for things to go wrong. Bad things happen to celebrities, like Justin Bieber gets arrested, which actually was noticeable, or One Direction breaks up, something like that. It's pretty bad.